Hello and welcome to First Flight, a Star Trek Enterprise rewatch podcast where we are watching and discussing each episode of Enterprise in succession. First Flight is a proud member of the Tricorder Transmissions Network.
This is Commander Tucker of Enterprise. We've got some information you're going to want to hear.
Welcome, Enterprise fans. I'm your co-host, Chris.
And I'm your co-host, Abby.
And tonight we are discussing the seventh episode of Season 2. The seventh was written by Rick Berman and Brandon Braga and was directed by David Livingston. It aired on November 6th, 2002. But before we begin our discussion, we need to issue a read alert.
Tactical alert. All hands to stations.
There are potential spoilers ahead. We might end up talking about any part of the series at any time, so you have been warned. And now for a summary of the episode, it's time for the Captain's Log. Okay, Abby, let's go.
Captain Starlog Supplemental.
All right. T'Pol and Archer embark on a top-secret mission to capture a fugitive who has eluded Vulcan authorities for nearly 20 years. It's going to be a good one.
That's a lot of running. I'm tired.
Yeah, well, perhaps he was on the treadmill like last episode, right?
Yes, well, it's time to deploy our subspace amplifiers and get into this episode. We'll start with a quick chat about the cold open and then head into our pros and decons section. Each of us will share 3 of our favorite parts of the episode, and then if there are things that don't gel with us, we'll have a discussion on any decons from the episode. And you might hear a dog bark in this discussion if somebody's Porthos Pick is mentioned, but we'll still discuss them later on.
All right, so let's not waste any time and get into this episode. As always, we start with the cold open, and this one was short and sweet. But Chris, what are your thoughts on how this episode starts?
I have 3 notes. Vulcan script, minor key piano, mysterious phone call. I loved seeing T'Pol with the Vulcan book. Right? Of course she would read in Vulcan on her downtime. This is some kind of, what is this, a Vulcan novel or some kind of myth or something? And I like the idea that when she's tired, she's going to her native language. So that's really cool. And then the piano is mysterious and unusual. We don't get a lot of solo piano in Star Trek. So it did kind of tick me out for a moment. I'm not against it. It was setting the mood, but it was off-putting. And that kind of is the whole episode to me, just found in that scoring right there. What about you, Abby?
Well, I would like to second that. I absolutely love the Vulcan script. I think it's beautiful. I love that it is a vertical language. And when I was looking at the book, I was also wondering, what is she reading? Of course, she must be going back to something in her native tongue. And then I was thinking, I wonder if it's like poetry or like meditation focuses or something like teachings of Sirach or something, because it didn't look like there was a ton of script on any of the pages. And I know that there's many words within each line, but it looked like it was something that was fairly simple. So I'm wondering if it wasn't mantras or something. But no matter what it is, it was beautiful. And I love that she was actually using a physical book.
Yeah.
I think that was just a really neat touch. It's another reason I think maybe it's something more spiritual. If anybody can translate Vulcan out there, I'm all about knowing what that is. So please hit us up if there's somebody out there who is fluent in the Vulcan writing.
Yes, please.
But otherwise, I agree. I like that this is kind of short and mysterious and it sets the mood. I also noticed the piano. It didn't really bother me much. I felt like it made it feel a little off. And that's kind of what I felt like the mood of the whole first part of this episode was that everybody was just a little off. Everything was a little bit not the way it should be. So it kind of helped me set the mood. And I really did like that we knew that this was going to be a moody episode before we even got to the opening credits.
It definitely is. And before we finish with the cold open, I'd like to say that I've really liked this Vulcan woman who calls, right?
Hmm.
We don't, I feel like we don't see enough Vulcan women in authority, right, in this series. And that didn't occur to me until this episode. Like, oh, yeah, they're usually some kind of Vulcan male. Am I right? Am I reading that right?
Yeah, I think especially up to this part. I mean, we had Ambassador Valar in Fallen Hero last season, but other than that, you're right, there aren't as many women, and we hear about them more than we see them.
Yeah.
So this was really nice to see that, and that she was the head of security, even, or had some
Yes.
place in the Ministry of Security that was high up. That's an important distinction as well.
Absolutely.
All right, well, cruising out of the cold open on a high point there, let's jump into our pros. So, Chris, hit me up with what your first pro for this episode is.
I just got to dive right into a big one, which is Manus's performance is just so compelling and sympathetic. And then with that turn shown to be very manipulative. And I loved his performance. It was very un-Vulcan like, but so much great face acting. His eyes tell so much in the story. I could watch this actor for a long time. And in fact, I wish we got more than what we got from this actor. I wish this was a recurring arc throughout the series as we're bumping into him for, or something. But I think there's still a lot of story left on the table for this character and to Paul.
Yeah, I really agree. I think that this was a great guest star, and I feel like this is a guest star that is often overlooked because while he is the focus of this episode, he's also not the focus, as it's definitely to Paul's story with him involved in it. But
Yeah.
I couldn't agree more. I remember the first time watching this, not being sure if I believed him or not, and feeling very sympathetic to poor to Paul, who, not only coming back to some of these memories, is feeling like she should be judge and jury, but it's not her place. And it's so interesting to see him recognize that. And he played the con man so well. And you can almost, when you go back knowing that he's conning, you can see those wheels turning. That face acting you were talking about, he's
Mm.
watching, he's observing. It's all those little bits. You can see when there's conversations between like Archer and T'Pol and Mayweather, he's watching them like, a ping pong game. He's observing, and then he's using that as he can turn it around to help himself. And the change that I really appreciated with this actor is at the very end when they're on the ship and he's exposed, and then it is just deadly serious, and all of that pretense is gone, and he's there just like, yep, you found me, you figured it all out, okay. And that's hard to do when you have such limited screen time.
I still found him in those moments to be somewhat sympathetic, though, because
Mm-hmm.
we still don't see the toxins at that point, right?
Yeah,
And
yeah.
that he's just a desperate man. Like he still wants to be with his family and all that kind of stuff. This whole story narrative he's constructed, I don't know if it's true or not. We don't know.
Yeah,
And it's
yeah.
interesting that they chose this actor because he plays bad guys. And so instinctively, we're like, oh, this is a bad guy. But they chose him to play a part of a bad guy that's trying to convince us he's a good guy, right? Because I
Yeah.
remember him from Remember in Voyager, where he plays the father of the woman beyond B'Elanna is reliving memories of the father
Mm-hmm.
of that species that commits genocide. And then he's also the bad guy in X-Men, the first X-Men movie, right?
Oh
Where that's where
yeah.
I really remember him from, where he turns into the giant jellyfish. Uh, but yeah, so he's a very good actor, very effective at what he does, and it was really neat to see him navigate this nuanced role. And like you said, I didn't think of this until you said it, that he is just watching them play ping pong and he's reading the
Mm-hmm.
scene and deciding how to play next. He's playing chess, really. Ping pong and chess at the same time. He's good. But yeah, that's all I have to say about him. Except that again, I wish we got more of this character, because I think this idea of rehabilitating Vulcans is
Mm-hmm.
fascinating to me and made me
Mm-hmm.
immediately think of Spock Amok.
Yes. Yeah. And the Serene Squall too. I'm wondering,
Yes.
like, is this pre or post Kolinar? Like, there's a
Uh-huh.
lot of connections to Strange New Worlds now too, which is very interesting. And
And Cybok.
yes, in Cybok for sure. Yeah, I'm really thinking to myself too. I wonder, after watching this multiple times, if the story doesn't ring so true because maybe both of these things are true. Maybe he is hauling injector casings and biotoxins, and he was doing the first one for a while to feed his family, and maybe he wasn't making it. So that's where the biotoxins came in. I mean, he is still a Vulcan, he's still trained in logic. My headcanon for all the different ways that this could have gone to get him to this point is he really dying? I mean, if he's carrying around those injector casings, he's definitely at least having exposure.
Well, or maybe he is trapped in this
Yeah,
biotoxin trade and he can't
yeah,
find his way out,
yeah.
right?
It's Vulcan Breaking Bad.
Exactly. Exactly. And that's what I'm saying. I think the story wanted to do a story for T'Pol, and I gotta say it didn't really work for me very well, but it could have been richer if it focused on him more. I don't know.
Yeah.
I look forward to diving into more of our pros and decons and discovering more about the story, but um, it wasn't my favorite episode so far that we've done.
Well, kudos to Bruce Davison who played Manos there. So absolutely great job on making us think about a bad guy in a totally different way there.
Yeah, and want to know more.
Yeah, and to want to know more.
So I want to know what your first pro is, Abby.
All right. So my first pro is early in the episode where it's the first briefing scene where they're back in the command center, which I love that
Mm.
the command center is kind of like a conference room that's still on the bridge. So everybody's just ready to go. And this is fun because it's the majority of our cast up there. Archer is still super annoyed, but he's trying to sell this to Trip and let him know he's just as annoyed as he is, but we're going to smile and grin and bear it. And all the back and forth there and all the little looks and Travis throwing a few comments in about this and that are practical because he's getting sucked into this. And, I always think to myself, for the amount of time that Trip spends badgering Archer about what's going on, why isn't he badgering Travis? Or is he badgering Travis off screen? Because Travis is at least knowing where they're going or where they've been. So I'm wondering if he's not going to get a few extra desserts slid his way for a little tidbits of information later. But, anyways, this scene is just fun for me. I like all the back and forth. I like how there's so much unspoken. We're talking about face acting a lot in Enterprise, and there is a ton of face acting here.
Mm.
And one of my favorite parts is when it's like, oh, we're going to have a little bit of time to just hang around. And Malcolm is like, yes, I have weapons upgrades ready to go. Like, that is the most Malcolm thing right there. And meanwhile, Trip is getting all sarcastic and talking about polishing the handles and the
Oh, I
doorknobs.
loved great
And
line.
it is a great line, but it's so the two of them right there. And it's just funny to see those differences like that and to see our crew coming together even for something as mysterious and lacking in details as this. They all trust each other and know each other well enough to come together and form a fairly decent plan for how things are going to go both on the mission and back on the ship.
Yeah, I mean they're the best of the best, and they're gonna get the job
Mm-hmm.
done and do the right thing, just like in Marauders, right?
There you go.
They don't have a personal tie into this mission. They don't even know what the mission is, but they're gonna
Yeah.
do their best.
Exactly. Well, and they trust not just Archer who's giving the orders, but to Paul who is the reason behind the orders that Archer has to give. So
Exactly.
I think that's good to see everybody up to that level of respect now. They have gelled. This is season 2. They're ready to go.
Absolutely.
All right. So what's your second pro for this one, Chris?
It's a really small one, but it made me very happy. And of course, it involves Phlox. So when Trip invites Phlox and Reed into the captain's mess, I love that idea just in general, for one. But what I'm really picking here is Phlox mentioning that the crew or like some kind of virus is on board from the deuterium tanks, which is
Yes.
just a very subtle allusion to the Marauders episode, right?
Mm-hmm.
So I love that moment, that little moment that's connecting the two episodes together. We've talked about some serialization between Minefield and Dead Stop and now
Mm-hmm.
Marauders and this episode. And I just love all that thread is threaded through, rewarding us that pay attention deeply. It doesn't take much, right? It's
Yeah.
one little line, but I really appreciated it.
Oh, I love that too. And I love that we've gotten to the point of this series where they can make references back to themselves and people get it. And whether it's back to the first season or just 2 episodes ago, it's like they were dipping their toes into testing out how longer arcs and longer stories were going to go at that time on TV because it wasn't a big thing. And, DS9 had kind of broken the water there. So here we're going to try it, and then we know what happens season 3. So this, I love their little bits of continuity. And yes, for all of us nerds who are out there really watching these 3 4 5 times and taking notes, we all appreciate those little things.
Absolutely. Yeah. So yeah, that was it. It's a small one, but it made me very happy and just made me appreciate how much the writers, they didn't have to do that, but they did. And that was a
Yeah.
big deal to me. So, your next pro.
Okay, so this one, I was thinking a lot about how to put this one, and I had different parts of this pro in a bunch of places until I realized what I kind of wanted to condense it down to is, even though he's not the biggest player, Travis is
Hmm.
so vital and important in this episode. He doesn't have a lot of lines, but okay, he's the one with the takedown when they
Mm-hmm.
actually get Manos. He's the one who ends up getting him on the floor and saying, "Don't you move." He's the one who's guarding him. And even though the table and the fire and all that starts, I mean, he jumps back into that fire
Yeah.
to get them out. So
Yeah.
thank you, Travis, for being bold and brave. He goes over that table that flipped. And then they would not have found those biotoxins had Travis not
Mm-hmm.
noticed condensation. Like, that is a boomer thing. That is a top
Yeah.
of the best kind of thing. This episode would have been so different if Travis had not been their pilot. And he is absolutely not the focus here. And like I said, he probably still only has about a dozen lines, but he's important. And the amount of character building that we get from all the little bits of Travis. I mean, even when they're hiding and Mano starts running and Archer whistles, and then there's Travis, like he is ready. And I just love seeing that. I wish we had gotten so much more Travis because he has so much potential to grow into this even more amazing officer. Because come on, he's solving mysteries with condensation.
Yeah, they definitely finally gave him some stuff to do, but not a
Mm-hmm.
lot of lines to do it with. But still, yeah, when he stops Manos, I cheered out loud. It was
I
that
know.
moment. I was like, Travis, stop the bad guy, and he's the muscle at the
Exactly.
door too. And
Mm-hmm.
yeah, solving the mystery of the condensation, that was really cool. So yeah, I have to applaud this pick. It's a very good pick.
Well, thank you very much. Like I said, I was kept finding little bits of Travis here and there. I'm like, no, it's just got to be a Travis pick. It just has to be a Travis pick.
Yeah, and I, when I was first watching the episode, I was like, "Oh, so now that Archer's coming, they don't need a pilot because Archer's a pilot. So why is Travis coming? If this is a sensitive, high security situation, the less people, the better.
Mm-hmm.
So like it doesn't really make sense for Travis to be there. I'm just super glad he is there.
Me too.
you know, And if this guy's a dangerous criminal, I mean, I want more. I want to bring muscle there. So yeah, great pick. More Travis. I want Travis solving mysteries. Let's get Travis in
Travis and
$2.
Hoshi solving mysteries in smart
Yes.
ways would be so fun.
Yes. Oh my gosh. Absolutely.
There's a
So
series of fanfics right there, somebody.
absolutely, yes. These linguistic puzzles and that takes
Yes.
boomer knowledge and stuff
Mhm.
like that. Yep, definitely. Okay.
All right. So now that we have set that in motion, what's your number two, Chris?
My number three, my last
Three.
one.
Sorry. What's
We're
your number three?
zooming through. This is the tightening of the relationship between T'Pol and Archer. I'll get into some stuff in my decons from this episode about this, but I also really love that moment on the deck of that station where she's holding her phase pistol out at Manos as he's walking away, and Archer just comes up besides her. He could have just shot Manos himself,
Mm-hmm.
but he knew she had to make that decision, and he had to say, "Why did you want me here?"
Because I trust you.
Then trust me. You were sent to apprehend him, not to judge him.
Because I trust you. What a great moment between first officer and captain. And usually it's the other way around. The first officer is the trusty right hand of the captain, but this time the captain is mentoring her. And I found that interesting. And then that last scene together, is wonderful as well. So I'm enjoying their lack of friction. If I can go back to A Night in Sick Bay, the lack of friction here, because that relationship is just getting tighter and tighter.
Yeah, I agree. And I thought about this one a lot, and I had a nebulous idea of how to put it as a pro. So I'm glad that you phrased it the way you did, the tightening of the relationship, and that moment you pointed out on the platform is the moment that you don't turn away from in this episode. I feel like, most Star Trek episodes have that, okay, I could have it on in the background if I've seen this 100 times, but there's always a couple moments here and there that you're going to watch for sure. That's the moment in this episode that you're going to watch for sure. And
Okay,
see,
hold on, pause. I'm sorry. Jim,
no,
if you're listening, this needs to be like top 5 moments you can't turn away
can't not
from.
watch.
Yeah,
Yeah.
in Star Trek. Or you could do it per
Ooh.
series, right? Because a bunch of episodes just came to mind.
Ooh, yeah. Yeah. And we'll do the Enterprise one.
Yeah, anyway, sorry to interrupt.
No, we're talking to Jim at Trek Ranks. That's Jim Morehouse, our friend. If you haven't listened, he's our play cousin on the network. Go look him up and see why this is a perfect Trek Ranks idea. So shipping that
Yes.
one off that way. So we as huge Enterprise fans know that this isn't going to be one of the few times we'll see T'Pol get emotional. We understand that she's got more of that coming. This is one of the first times that we see her deeply emotional like this. Like we've had some other ones in the past season, but that was more of an assault type thing. So this is where we really see things bubbling to the surface, and we start to see that there's a pattern emerging of T'Pol having emotions closer to the surface or more readily accessible than a lot of Vulcans. And we start to see that maybe this is why she wants to be on Enterprise. She wants to be around humans. She's not as easily compartmentalizing some of these experiences and emotions that she's had as a Vulcan. Like she can't do that the way that some other Vulcans can. And I love that this all connects to the fact that she had been at Pajem before the Andorian incident last season.
Yeah.
That's why she's so familiar, because she's had all of this. And that's so cool. And for Archer to know that and to have heard that in all this exposition that she gets to in this episode, and he's putting those pieces together. So he knows how much she's trusting him now. Not only to say, I trust you out loud, but to reveal those other parts of this story and the connections she knows he can make with them. And that's a neat thing. Like they are both okay being vulnerable together in this type of way. And yeah, like I said, the tension is not there, and I love this relationship.
Yeah, there's definitely a vulnerability, especially in the shuttle pod while she's filling in the gaps of the story there. Um, her guard definitely drops as she's having those flashbacks. So
Mm-hmm.
yeah, good pick. Good pick. Okay. All right. So Abby, I gotta know, what is your last pro?
All right, so I don't think this is going to surprise anyone who listens to me, but I
Toast?
love the cold. All right. Sorry. It's not actually the toast, which is really funny, but that I was laughing so hard I think the Zoom mic cut out. That's funny. Um, no, but that's on my honorable mentions of pros for sure. But what I have here is I love the cold weather gear that they have in this, the costumes and all the different jackets and boots and all that. Now, keep in mind we're recording this in the middle of February and I live in Wisconsin, and I am really sick of all my cold weather gear that I have right now. So maybe a little bit of this is me just really wishing I had something different to wear every single day when I walk outside. But these jackets are gorgeous and they all look like they're actually functional. They would actually keep you warm. There's a
Yeah.
million different materials. There's furs, there's wraps, there's leathers, there's hoods. It's just neat. And none of them are the same. And if you look at even Archer and Travis are wearing things that are not the same. And I know they're going down to blend in, but this is cool. They still have some of the quilting. It still looks like they're, their jackets that they had first season when they were exploring in the caves,
Mm,
but not. And I just think whoever designed this must have had so much fun just pulling out a whole bunch of
yeah.
cold weather gear and then gussying it up because it's neat. And the boots are all intricate and strapped and fancy, and they've
Mhm.
got flourishes, and some of them have toe curls, and they all look like they've really been worn in. This is just a beautiful job of costuming. A whole bunch of extras, most of which you see on screen for maybe a total of 3 seconds if
Yeah.
they're lucky, and not that close up for most of them. An honorable mention to the makeup in this scene because there are a
Yes.
whole bunch of really cool looking aliens.
Yeah. Yeah. A part of me wanted to stop and try and identify all the aliens.
Me
Like, have we
too.
seen any of these before? Are they reused from Deep Space Nine? Because Deep Space Nine always had tons of aliens in the background.
Yeah.
And for a moment, it's the aliens always out of focus. But I feel like one of those one of those waking moment aliens, I feel like is in there,
Yes.
just it's out of focus the whole time, but that shape was in the background a few times. So yeah. Um, yeah, I noticed the aliens, the prosthetics, and definitely the costuming as well. And Manos's costume with all the straps that Paul eventually
Mm-hmm.
cuts off. Cool
Mm-hmm.
addition that they had to work into it. His costume actually is
Yeah.
part of the story and an
Yeah.
important, which is really neat. It's like they wrote that for you.
Maybe they did, because I was also just about to point out how many of them underneath have like turtlenecks or sweaters or scarves, which everyone who follows me knows I love some good Star Trek knitwear, and it's in this episode. And that's just, a little bit of cherry on top of the sundae for me.
Yeah, that bar or whatever that place was, it was a really unique set. Like we've seen a lot of, you know, underworld, underbelly bars in Star Trek, and they all kind of look very similar. This one had its own kind of mystique. So just a bonus to your pick there. Well, let's move on to the decons because these are the parts of the episode that don't really gel with us. So, Abby, why don't we start with your decons?
Okay, so I have a couple really silly ones, and the first one is literally about gel because oh my god, Trip has so much hair gel in this episode.
Oh my
Like
gosh, yes.
distractingly huge amounts of hair gel. And I kept thinking to myself, I don't feel like Enterprise often looks dated when it
Hmm.
comes to stuff like that because they keep things pretty simple. But this was, man, this was early 2000s gel hair. And it
Yep.
was so distracting throughout
Yes.
the entire episode. And it made me take him less seriously. So I wonder if that was a choice that because
It's
since the B plot was him kind of having issues being acting captain, but I also think this was the early 2000s and the gel industry was doing well. We'll just put it that way.
you know, oh, okay, so I'll just go into one of my decons because it is about Trip. I love Trip,
Okay.
especially I love Trip in Command in later
Hmm.
seasons. This just didn't gel with me. His
No,
portrayal of being so weak and indecisive, because he's not that way. Even
agreed.
now, even at this point in the series, even in Broken Bow,
Yeah.
he's very commanding
Yeah.
and sure of himself in engineering. And I
Hmm.
don't see why that wouldn't translate. I could see that, like I wanted him to consult Phlox and read in those moments and then
Yeah.
go with the decision, right?
Yep.
Trust his people because he would. He's a team,
Yeah.
like I see him as being a team leader in engineering. It would be the same here. And so
Absolutely.
yeah, and I looked at his hair the whole episode. I'm like, what's going on? Whenever he reaches back to press the comm, in the captain's mess, I was like,
Yeah.
what is different about his hair? Is it parted on a
Ugh.
different side? Like, what's going on? You pointed it out. Thank you.
Ugh.
And it does weaken him. It really does. It's amazing how much hair does change the character. That's fascinating. Thank you for pointing that out.
Well, think about, I mean, I still lobbying second time tonight. We're throwing topics at Trek Cranks, but I want a hair episode because hair in Star Trek is so important. Like, how many episodes can you and all of you out there listening peg exactly what they are by the hair of a
Mm,
character? Probably in what, 3 frames? Sometimes a single frame. You see the hair and you know because it is that important and it is part of the character. I mean, whether it's for good or for bad. Think about Luoxana and all her wigs. I mean, that is
yeah.
hair. That's a character with hair. And
Or more than that, like think of the background characters on TNG.
yeah,
All the
yeah,
female officers have these weird updos and
yeah.
like extensive braids. Like they spend like an hour in the morning after they get their uniform on
Hmm.
to get ready. Oh, red alert, get to your stations. Hold on.
I need my side braids.
Yeah.
Yeah.
It is interesting.
Yeah. Well, it's one of those things that when you think about how later in the episode he is called out for looking young. Well, if he had his normal hair, he'd probably look 5 years older. I mean, he looks like somebody's mom just took a wet comb and parted his hair for him. Like, and that was the style. Like, I'm not gonna say that it wasn't, but it it that dates this. So this dates the episode as much as a bare midriff would because it's
Oh
just
yeah.
very early 2000s.
So I have to ask you, is Archer does Scott Bakula have some blonde highlights throughout his hair too?
Yeah, he does.
Okay, because like when the light's shining on it in this episode, it's like in weird blonde and weird spots. Like I don't
I
know,
just think he got a lot
unnecessary.
of sun in Marauders, right? He was out in the
There
desert,
you
so he picked
go.
up some natural highlights from all that
Perfect.
vitamin D that went through his cap.
Well, when I don't get a haircut soon enough, I will put some gel in my hair just to keep it controlled. So maybe Trip just needs a haircut.
Perhaps he does. It's been busy, right?
Hmm. So I
All
already gave
right.
my first decon. So what's your second decon?
Okay. So I've just praised the costumes, but now I'm going to ask for my rational brain to just take over for a minute because what the heck are those straps on Jocelyn's coat made out of that just tying them around to Paul's shoes will prevent her boots from being eaten through by the acid on the platform? Like, what kind of super material are those straps and why don't we make more things out of it? Because it's obviously very flexible, very lightweight, and durable is all get out. Because I remember from the very first time I saw this going, what? That's like wrapping a rag around your shoe and like running through fire. It's still gonna melt, but it didn't. So I would very much like to know. And how did T'Pol know that those straps were made out of whatever the magic material was? Like, does she know something being a Vulcan? Does it have a particular sheen? Was I don't know. It took me out of the episode because it feels so massively unrealistic. Because not only does she run to the ship, she runs back and
Yeah.
she hasn't burned her feet off.
Well, and then
So,
later he jumps down from his ship and runs, and then
yeah,
the Archer runs out there too. And then when I'm watching this, I'm like, okay, so she can't shoot Manos on that deck because then he'll fall face down into acid. Like,
yeah.
so there's some issues there. But yeah.
Yeah, and only her shoes make the little like pretty acid poof when she runs. And is
Mm.
that because she's wearing the magic straps? Or did they all get magic straps? Or was it flushed out after they realized there were a bunch of people running across the platform? Like it was just this gaping plot hole that bothers me. It's bothered me for 20 years.
Yeah, for sure. The writers, and I'll have to say, like, I told you this in a text earlier, like I had zero memory of this episode. I've seen Enterprise through twice at minimum. I had zero memory of this episode. So I'm watching it like it's a brand new episode of Star Trek for me, which was fun. And I'm watching it like, okay, so someone was a fan of MacGyver. Like this was a MacGyver moment for T'Pol to make her seem like a very resourceful, tactical,
Yes.
security
Yes.
person who can make
Yes.
changes in the moment to deal with the situation to get her prey. So like in that sense, it worked for me. But if you think about it, it doesn't work at all. The acid is only there to keep them from leaving, but then
Yeah.
it's not there for the rest of the episode, essentially.
Exactly. I mean, it would have been much more, it would have been a different episode if she had come, crawling back with burned feet going, I didn't find anything. Yeah. So I'm glad that they didn't, but it still bothers me. I mean, at least explain it away. One line of dialogue. Oh my God, she ran out there, flushed the platform or whatever. So by the time she was running back, half the acid was gone or whatever. But
And they could have done away with the acid if the whoever the leader of this place who said, "Oh, your warrant's good," should have said, "Your warrant's good, but you can't leave until the judge advocate comes and clears you," or something. Like something like
yeah,
that.
exactly.
And then there's no
Yes.
acid,
Yes.
and it's all good. They don't need
Yes.
to deal with this situation. Create a plot hole. So, um,
All right. Well, while we're talking about things that pull us out of the episode, can I tell you the other thing that really bothers me about this is when they find those biotoxins. I'm sorry, it looks like Gatorade in black light. It's lemon lime Gatorade in black light.
oh
I mean, the
man,
bottle shape even, and I have seen plenty of Gatorade in black light in my college years, and that's
oh,
all I can think of. Yeah. So yeah,
go
maybe it's
Gators.
because I actually probably watched this when I was just slightly out of college, but I remember always thinking that. And I'm like, I don't know what kind of biotoxins those are, but they look like Gatorade. So I hope he wasn't planning to chug them later on.
No, yeah, no. Yeah, that it didn't pull me out there, but I can definitely see that they were very bright, neon green, kind of odd, stood out. Which the whole episode has this off
Yeah.
feeling, right? Off tone. The music's off a little bit. That prop was off a little bit. So yeah, I think that's fair. All right, my next decon is probably unexpected, and I'm not even sure how I'm gonna talk about it. But it is how. Okay, so T'Pol walks into Archer's ready room. He's eating toast in this awesome chair thing that I don't ever remember seeing. Um, and his hair, glows in the light a little bit from the highlights. But what throws me off is he's so nonchalant, so relaxed when he's not being given information.
Yeah.
And that's like very early season one, Jonathan Archer, to me. He's still wide-eyed, kind of carefree, still that, we're gonna go explore, guys. That is what I got from this. And he hasn't been that for a little bit. Now he's not quite season 3, like cynical, dark, broken, gonna
Gritty.
do whatever it takes. Yeah. But he's a
Yeah.
lot more not hardened, but experienced and broken in.
Seasoned.
Seasoned. It's a horrible thing to say to a man.
Yes,
Yeah.
sure.
Yeah.
Oh, that's a terrible thing to say to a man.
Oh.
Sorry.
Broken in is better.
Yeah. So broken in, seasoned, whatever you want to say. It didn't gel with me that he was be so relaxed. And then when we get to the mission briefing, when they're standing around there, you liked his sarcasm there. I found it still kind of just like he's too cheery. Something's off. But you helped me with that a little bit, that he's trying to sell it to the crew. So that helps me in that scene. But yeah, just something seemed off with him, and it didn't seem like he would be pushing to Paul for more information instead of a little thanks for being so enlightening. I mean, I like that line, but I don't know. Something was off for me there. I can't quite put it into words, but that's my next decon.
Well, see, I think this flows into my nebulous decon. I feel the same way that you do, that there was just things were a little off here. And I finally thought, if I was going to fix this, what would I do? And my answer was I would totally drop the B plot with Trip and all that. And I would fill in missing scenes. Like, I want the scene after this where Forrest actually does call and Archer talks to him and he's like, oh yeah, I've been expecting you. And then that's where we see him change from, he doesn't think this is that big of a deal, he's going to talk to Forrest and it's going to go away, to, oh man, Forrest is telling me to do what she says. And that's where that switch to the sarcastic and angry comes in. And I feel like we're missing that conversation. And I love when Forrest and Archer talk, because I feel like you get those different layers of friendship and duty in reverse from how we normally get them. Normally it's Archer who's the one on top and he's talking to Trip or Malcolm or somebody. But when it's Forrest, Archer's the one who's below in rank, and it changes the dynamics. And then how he pulls that around and goes back to the crew is different. So I feel like we're missing that scene. I feel like we're missing the scene where Trip is curious and wants to go find out more and goes to Travis and says, hey, Travis, you're going on this. Come on, can you at least, tell me without telling me, kind of thing. I wish we had spent more time learning about T'Pol's and Manos's backstory. I wish we could flesh out the A plot. And I think that's why it feels like it's just off, because they're shoehorning in this kind of comedy that doesn't feel like the same tone. And it makes me think back to Silent Enemy, that from last season, where they've got the whole thing about the aliens that don't talk, and the other one is about the pineapple birthday cake from Malcolm. And both of those are not bad. They just don't go together. So it makes the one that's more lighthearted seem so much more wrong in the story. Whereas if it was paired with a different story, it would have been okay. And that's what I feel like is happening here. Like, if we want to talk about, Trip having an issue with being in command, we could have done it differently, done it better with a different pairing of the story, because it does make the tone feel weird. And I feel like we're missing chunks of the A story that I would have helped it be a better story.
Well, and to your point, and I think you're right. Get rid of the whole Trip thing, because it's not even resolved in any way. Like, he's set up in that the captain's mess scene to be indecisive, right? He can't make even small decisions. And that goes nowhere, because he just pretends to be Captain Archer and the end. Like, there's no resolution, there's no arc for that character except to make him look weak. And I don't want him to look weak, right? I mean, we're here to service that character and to push him. So if he starts from a low place, that's cool. But where's the arc going
Yeah.
in the episode? And it doesn't go anywhere. So yeah, get rid of that. Give me more flashback.
Yeah.
Or give me more Manos. Maybe after the episode, give me him reuniting with his family, and suddenly we're like, oh yeah, he was bad, but he's a family man. You know what I mean? Like we've
Yeah.
gotten that kind of thing in like Hard Time in Deep Space Nine, where the main, I forget his name, but the main like mobster guy has a family and a cat, and you know what I mean?
Yep.
There could have been a lot
Yep.
more here. So you're totally right. Get rid of that B plot. But then those characters don't have anything to do.
Right. Right. But it also makes me think when you say to have that like last end scene, what about an end scene kind of like the most toys with Data and Fajo, and you've
Oh,
got T'Pol and Manos on either side of the holding cell discussing what she did and why. And I would have liked to have found out somewhere in here, was Jocelyn, who died before, actually innocent? Were they both still innocent at that point, and Manos has only gone to biotoxins now? Like, or was Jocelyn the one who got him into it? Were they both into it? Like, I
that's what I'm
that would have been a
saying.
time, yeah, to throw that out there. If we would have had an extra scene at the end, or even in the flashbacks, that would have made this story better.
We didn't get any resolution to any narrative thread besides
Yeah,
Archer and T'Pol trust each other, which we started
exactly.
the episode already knowing, right?
Yeah,
She explicitly says, "I trust you," right? So,
yeah.
and he trusts her. We've established that. So, yeah, where does this story go? And we don't get. I'm okay with ambiguity and a lack of answers.
Right.
Some of the best short stories in fiction, some of the best episodes of Star Trek leave us on an uncertain note, but they leave us things to consider, with enough material to consider. And I don't think we have enough material in that flashback. It looks like Jocelyn's about to reach for his gun to shoot. So there's no
Yeah.
ambiguity there. Manus is messing with her, but like it's pretty clear in the video. And who, like you said, who is he? Whoa. Yeah. Yeah.
Well, and I often say Enterprise lives in the gray, and I like that. But this is not the right
This,
kind of gray.
this
This
is the
is
fog.
just unfinished. Yeah, or this is we just cut off. It's the sheer drop in off in the fog, and you're like, oh, all right, that was it. And it doesn't make you want to go back and revisit it. Like you were saying, you didn't remember this one. This isn't what I go back and watch often either. It's just because it doesn't feel like a full story. It feels like part of a story,
But
or two parts of a story squished together.
yeah, like get rid of the trip thing. And I think there's the bones of a really fascinating, like
Yeah.
psychological thriller here.
Yes.
Oh,
Yes.
amazing, amazing thriller.
You could even
And
have two-parted it, like the past
uh-huh.
be one episode and then now be the second part. It would have been awesome.
Or yeah, absolutely. Yeah, absolutely. So I think we've established, and this brings me into my last decon, which is I always struggle with T'Pol and her emotions right at the surface. Um, because it doesn't seem like a Vulcan. I get it why Spock works for Spock, but even Spock's emotions are more under the surface. And then we have Tuvok, our first full Vulcan main cast member, and he has moments where he's wrestling with those emotions, but extraordinary circumstances draw them to the surface, right? And
Right.
it's usually not just a memory of something, unless there's a girl falling from a precipice.
This is our last chance. Take us to the precipice. Concentrate.
Catherine! Help me, Catherine, please! Don't let go! Don't let me fall! No! Help me,
Some memory virus. But it's something critical. And even when we have Sarek suffering from this disorder, he's meditating, he's actively trying to control and deal with this emotional outburst that he's trying to suppress. If we're trying to find some missing scenes, I want to see the scenes where she's trying to use Vulcan discipline to control and repress these memories and emotions. Like she's trying to fight it back. You know what I'm saying?
Yeah.
In fact,
Yeah.
it just seems like she goes from stoic Vulcan to emotional, and we don't see that arc of her trying to wrestle away from it. It's just immediately wrestling into it. I don't know if I'm saying it well, but it's one of my biggest struggle of DePaul, is this kind of aspect of her character, and I really wish we got to season 5 so we got that Romulan story, because then I think it would work a lot better. Oh, it's because she's not really Vulcan, that would help. But I'll let you respond, because I know DePaul's one of your favorites.
I do like T'Pol, and I like T'Pol. I I like T'Pol wrestling with her emotions, but I agree with you that they didn't often do it with the slow burn.
Is it earned?
Yeah, exactly. And this one was not. And sometimes later on, and we'll get to those where I feel that they are, and it is better. And it's interesting because I also really love Tuvok and another full-blooded Vulcan. And what some of the moments that stand out the most for me are when he's either the most logical or the most illogical. And I kind of feel like when I look at T'Pol's arc as a whole, that's where I fall too. Some of my favorite moments of T'Pol is when she's at either one extreme or the other. And I think maybe that's because they did have a hard time doing those in betweens with her. And I think they get better at it. I think the writers get better. I think the actress gets better. I think the stories get better at allowing for some of that. And I think when we go to later on, and we find out that they're talking about how this mind meld that she was forced into last season has caused an imbalance in her. And when you look back at it like that and you say, well, that impacts some of that and that affects some of it too, and then
That's
you
true.
think about it that way. But I don't think they had that planned at this point. I think maybe that was their retcon for why we had done some of these episodes like this. But I also feel that if we hadn't shoehorned this trip plot in, we could have had more scenes in this episode that had allowed for that. And that, again, is why this should have been, sorry, secondary characters, you guys are going to be on the ship and in the briefing scene. We're going to do this the right way. And it could have been amazing.
Well, and I just don't buy that this moment of shooting Jocelyn is so traumatic enough. It didn't earn that, right?
Yeah.
Because she's a trained security officer at this moment. I'm sure she has done things like this. Now, if this was explored in a way, this was her first kill, the first time killing a life, and there's wrestling with that and talking about that and dealing with that, that might make it earned. But there's so much ambiguity and not enough said that it wasn't earned for me. And another concern I have is this evidence of the misogyny of the time? That, oh yeah, she's the woman Vulcan, so she's the emotional one.
Yeah, that would not be a surprising way to look at it, unfortunately.
Because I do like Tuvok at his most logical and his most emotional, but I also love just the stability of Tuvok.
Yeah.
And he's just always there, and there's something safe about that. So anyway, I don't mean to put a template of Tuvok onto T'Pol, but it is interesting to contrast those two full-blooded Vulcans.
Yeah, but lots of time in between them too, and lots of change to Vulcan society between them
true.
too. So lots to think about there. All right, should we move on to some barking dogs?
So We have come to the time where we discuss our favorite parts for the episode, our Porthos picks. If our picks were mentioned already in the discussion, which I don't think they were, we will expand a bit more here. And if they weren't, then we have a few more great moments to discuss. And I would love to talk about some more great moments. So, Abby, let's hear your great moment.
Okay, so I have an honorable mention here, which is just the shot from below of the shuttle docking with Enterprise was gorgeous. And just one of those effects that really still holds up 20 years later, not in high def. That was a really cool shot and a cool angle. So just wanted to call that out for a moment.
And I love when the little wings detract.
I know. It's just, you feel real. It feels real. It's very well done. Lots of little details there. So ship lover's dream.
Yes.
But my full Porthos is the scene in Archer's room where T'Pol comes and asks him to join her. Now, first of all, I have to say that I have been watching where he throws that water polo ball, and it is not the wall to the hallway, because the hallway door opens when T'Pol comes in, and that's not the wall he was using. So, man, his neighbors must be really glad they're right next to the captain, because not only does Porthos bark, but he throws a ball against the wall all the time.
I thought it was a door, so maybe it's a bathroom. Because
maybe it's the bathroom.
It's vibrating and moving when the ball hits it. So I don't know. We need to recheck that, but I think it looked like another kind of door, a smaller door, maybe to a bathroom.
All right. Well, that would be better. But the real reason, besides that made me laugh and go, oh my God, I am such a nerd. I am trying to figure out if he's using an external hallway wall for his polo ball. But anyways, I like the interaction here. And I like especially the very last probably 30 seconds where T'Pol starts to leave as if he's not going to join her. And he goes, okay, what's his name? And then says, see you tomorrow. And my very favorite part is how T'Pol starts to turn back to say something. She turns to walk. She does it again, doesn't say anything, and then walks out. It's this tiny little moment of surprise and fluster that she works through simply by not immediately leaving the room. And it's the first hint you have that there might be even more here, because she got so flustered. But it was also a moment that I think she wasn't sure that it was this level of trust between them, and now she 100% is. And she didn't know how to almost say the gratitude that she felt for that, and for the easy way that he said yes. And she didn't know how to say it, so she just didn't. But you could see the moment that she felt it. And I really like that little moment.
I like that too. The unspoken moments. Another unspoken moment is when she stands in front of the TV.
Yes, that cracks me up every time. I mean, and as a mother, I've done that. As a wife, I've done that. I'm sure I've done it in other places too. But it's those little moments of realism. And Archer at least has the decency to kind of sigh and be like, all right, I'm busted. Yes, I'm not really listening all the way. I'm watching water polo. But that's a cool little bit of growth in their relationship too. They wouldn't have been able to do that previously.
Yes, definitely. Well, I'm so glad you picked that moment, because it parallels perfectly with my pick.
Good.
Which is the last scene between them.
Yeah.
In the ready room. And there's humor and pathos, and then the Star Trek moment of the episode, right? There's an episode tells a story, but it's not Star Trek until this moment. And it's that moment where he acknowledges that it's going to be hard for her to deal with these memories, although anyway, I've talked about that. She says, no, it's not. And then he says, if you feel you need a leave of absence, and she's like, that won't be necessary. I was much younger then. And I love how he says then, well, you've spent a lot of time around humans lately. And her burn is such a Tuvok burn. It's so great. You do have a way of putting questionable actions behind you.
I know, it's great.
But that's not even the moment I'm choosing. It's leading up to the moment. What I do love is his commentary on the human condition, right? That's what I'm looking for from Star Trek. What are we learning about humans here? So when he says,
when you don't have the ability to repress emotions, you learn to deal with them and move on. Was there something else?
If you ever need someone you can trust,
I won't forget.
A simple statement. And when Star Trek removes us from our context and we realize, oh yeah, that's a huge thing that we do every single day.
Yep.
Right? As a teacher, that kid.
Yeah.
That kid just purposely took your papers off your desk, ripped them, and threw them on the ground while smiling at you. True story. And all you can do is look at him, and you just move on. And you deal with the child, but you move on with your emotions in that moment, and you continue teaching the rest of the kids. And that's something profound that we can do, and that not everyone learns to do well. And that is a really cool thing to think about. And I wish more time was spent exploring that in the episode, but I like that it was a nice button on the episode.
Yeah, I agree. That scene is beautiful. And the amount of time that I have spent thinking about that quote in relationship to both myself as a teacher of young kids and as a mother of young kids,
yes.
like trying to teach my kids how to do that. And it's one of those nebulous things, but it is such a necessary skill for existing in the world. And it's such a human skill. And yeah, that could have been an episode right there. And that is the Star Trek moment. And if we were writing a book that was, what lesson did we learn from every bit of Enterprise, that would be the lesson from this episode.
We have a book to write, Abby, me and you, called The Star Trek Moment, right?
Ooh,
there's our book,
our $1 million idea.
Yeah. Yeah, and of course then it ends, if you ever need someone you can trust, T'Pol says.
Yeah.
And Archer says, I won't forget. And that just ties in that moment, that thread between them comes tighter, that trust. So that was a good thread that was set up and then resolved, although what was set up already existed. They already trust each other, but this just affirms it. So, but I do appreciate with that attempt there with the episode thematically. So that was my pick. It's a strong moment in this episode. I really appreciate it.
Accessing library computer data.
All right, so here on First Flight, we love trivia and behind the scenes tidbits and stories. So we always pick a few to share about each episode. And why don't I start tonight? I have just kind of a fun one that I think really works for this episode. We've been talking about tie-ins to other episodes and callbacks, and it seems like Manos was working with the Axanar, the quote-unquote good guys from Fight or Flight, as most of his cargo containers have the Axanar written language on them, which I think is just a very cool thing. We were talking about how neat it is when a series gets to the point where it can make callbacks to itself, and there's another one of them. So how fun.
That is cool. Oh, unfortunately, the only thing I can only think of one thing when I hear Axanar. But we'll move on from that. Yeah, but I love those, that continuity that doesn't matter. Like, it's not part of the story. No one but us cares, right? But the people that make the show care about that internal continuity. And it's not always perfectly consistent, but the effort has always there to make it consistent. So yeah, I love that little piece. So my trivia, even though I didn't appreciate the Tucker story, I did love seeing him with 4 pips. And
Yeah.
so, yeah, this trivia is, when he's impersonating Captain Archer, he wears the fourth pip to signify the rank of captain, but he doesn't change into the gold uniform. So that's interesting. You'd think the Vulcan officer would notice that. But, maybe they didn't want to measure him and create a whole new uniform just for that moment, which I can understand.
They could probably think their color was off before they would think that he would have to roll up his pants being the captain.
Yeah, yeah. Well, I think it's time to give our final thoughts and our grappler ratings. So, Abby, on a scale of 1 to 10 grapplers, how do you rate this episode?
All right. So I think it's no surprise that this isn't one that's going to get a super high score from me. I feel like it had left a lot of endings unfinished. I feel like the tones were off in the two stories. I was always just kind of wishing for more of one and less of the other. I appreciate the trust that we see between Archer and T'Pol, but again, yes, we knew it was there already. It's very nice to see it, but we could have done even more. So this one gets 6.5 grapplers for me. Nothing wrong with it, nothing great about it. I appreciate parts of it. So how about you, Chris?
Yeah, you just made me think like the title is The Seventh, so it's about the seventh. What was the guy's name again?
Manos.
No, not
Or in
Manos.
Jocelyn,
because he's the
yeah.
seventh, right?
Yeah, Jocelyn's the seventh.
He's the one she doesn't remember. It's about the seventh, but we don't really learn much about the seventh. We only really focus on the sixth one. So, so for the issues with the narrative, we're similar in thoughts. This is a 6 for me out of 10. There's a lot of story left unfinished, like we've said. So I think it's not bad. It could just be so much better. And so it's a 6 for me. It's there's nothing offensive, so it's not a bad episode. It's just an unfinished one. And that's all I have to say about that.
Okay, so before we finish up, let's go through a quick recap of our pros for the 7th. Chris, why don't you recap for us first?
All right, my first pro is Manos's performance is captivating, sympathetic, and manipulative in the best kind of ways. Number 2 is Phlox's callback to the deuterium tanks that bring the virus to the ship, and that's from Marauders. And then number 3, the tightening between Archer and T'Pol's relationship.
You forgot your Porthos.
Oh, and my Porthos. Yes, my favorite scene is that last scene where Archer reveals the Star Trek moment. The theme of the episode is that humans can't repress our emotions in the same way as Vulcans, so we deal with them and we move on.
All right, and recapping mine, my number 1 pro was the briefing scene in the command center and all the unspoken and little character moments that we got going on there. My number 2 was Travis with the takedowns and the condensation,
Yes.
and Travis just being the one who really helped save the day here. And my third one was all the awesome cold weather gear that we got to see. And my Porthos honorable mention was the shot from below of the shuttle docking. And my full Porthos was the scene in Archer's room, specifically T'Pol's almost exit and then finally does exit moment.
My chronometer's running backwards, sir.
Incoming transmission.
You read my letter?
We want to remind you that we adore getting feedback and thoughts from our listeners. We collect them, and very soon we are going to do a mailbag episode where we share and discuss your thoughts, your insights, your ideas, your comments, your answers to the questions we throw out to you in the episode. So please drop us a line whenever you have something you'd like to share, and you might be featured on our next mailbag show.
If you would like to continue the discussion with us or share your Porthos pick or Grappler rating or any thoughts, you can reach us at First Flight Pod on Twitter, Instagram, and Facebook. You can reach me personally at Shelf Nerds or on my YouTube channel, Completing the Shelf. And Abby, what's the best place to reach you?
Best place to find me is still on Twitter. I'm at Abby M. Summer. That's SOMMER. I've been trying to peek around on Mastodon, but haven't done much of anything there. But if you love it, let me know why.
Yeah, me too. I mean, I plan to get there someday, maybe, but I mean, Twitter's still here, and it's still kind of working sometimes. But we want to thank you so much for spending this time with us. We'll be back next time with The Communicator, the 8th episode of Season 2. And as always, we leave you with this quote from Captain Jonathan Archer and your moment of Melanie.
The most profound discoveries are not necessarily beyond that next star. They're within us, woven into the threads that bind us, all of us, to each other.
Sorry if I got too negative on this one.
No, not at all. I was just telling my husband, this is I feel like there's 2 chunks of season 2 that have a couple just in a row. And that's what makes it so hard that I think that's why people say season 2 was kind of the lowest point of Enterprise, because we have like 3 or 4 in here that are fine, but nothing great and nothing awful. Then we have a couple good ones, and then we have another chunk of and then we have a bunch of good ones with a couple awful ones in there. But I feel like the other shows probably have the same proportions, but they're not as clustered. So when you get into this, it kind of feels like the doldrums of like, yeah, this is fine. It's okay. It could have been better.
Well, like I said before, I think TNG has some just really bad episodes. This episode is just boring and unfinished.
Yeah.
And like Singularity, isn't that a possession episode or something?
Yes.
Yeah. Oh, I hate those. I just can't stand them.
Well, except for the observer effect, I really like the observer
that one
effect.
is one of my favorite episodes of the entire series. I mean, yeah, I can't wait to talk about that one. Yeah, I mean that is an episode that, yeah. But I used to skip it. I used to not watch it because it's a possession episode. And then recently, I've just like, oh my gosh, this is amazing. So, thanks for doing this and setting up the script.
Yeah.
As always.
Always. As I was saying, that moment is just no, you're good. I had to get myself back in. All right, we're gonna edit this into something cohesive or put that button at the end.
No, no, you're good. Yeah. I'm sorry.
No, you're fine. You're right, because as soon as you said it, I sat up and I'm like, yes, that is Trek Ranks right there. And we should be on together again because that would be so much fun. Because now we have shorthand.
Yes.
We can out Jim. All right.
I'm going to send that soundbite just to him right there.
That's perfect.